One of the highlights of our interfaith trip to Israel this summer was going to a place called the Temple Mount. If you've ever seen a picture of the old city of Jerusalem, it's an easy place to identify. It's the place with the gold dome. The gold dome is the Dome of the Rock. That Temple Mount is a site of two sites sacred to the Muslim community, the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And like all things in Israel, there are many layers to that site. The history of it does not begin with the building of the Dome of the Rock. It begins actually in Jewish mythology. It is there that Abraham takes his son Isaac and sacrifices him, or attempts to sacrifice him to God. That's Jewish tradition. It wasn't called the Dome of the Rock or the Temple Mount back then. In the Bible, it was called Mount Moriah. It's called the Temple Mount because it is there that in biblical times, two temples were built, both of them destroyed. The temple cult, the priestly class, if you're a Kohen or a Levi, we're all Israelites. If you're not a Kohen or a Levi, you're an Israelite if you were born within the Jewish community. Those were the priestly class who ruled the temple, who did magnificent rituals, awesome and inspiring, frightening. Much of the text of the Bible, and certainly in the Talmud, is devoted to talking about what happened there and how it should happen. There was a time in Jewish history that it would be inconceivable to imagine a Judaism without the temple. If there hadn't been a temple, there would be no Judaism. We went there because it's an interesting site. There's a lot happening on that site, both religiously and politically. The day we went, I said to the folks we're going, we're going to have to get up really early. And we have really nice people at Beth Adam, and the folks who joined us from the churches and the synagogue. We had really good people. Everyone was there at the bus at 7 in the morning because we had to go through 2 layers of security. There are only 2 hours that non-Muslims are allowed to go on the Temple Mount. One of them right in the morning. And we have to go through 2 layers of the security that day. The first layer of security was going through Israeli border security, the same security one goes to as you're walking to what is the Western Wall, the wall where people put notes on, part of the wall that holds up the Temple Mount itself. So we pass through that layer, and then we walk up the ramp and we go to where we're going to walk really onto the Dome of the Rock. And there is the Muslim religious authority. They have actually control over that. That was a decision made back in '67. They have to approve the people going up, particularly that everyone is dressed appropriately. Read that mostly as women, having to make sure that they had themselves covered in long dresses. So between the sharing of shawls and safety pins and bobby pins, we finally got everyone ready. But we had already began to sense that this place was different than some of the other places we had been. In fact, our guide, Daron, who always carried a satchel, and in his satchel was the Hebrew Scripture, a New Testament, and the Quran. Because in Israel, you come to a site, typically there's a verse somewhere that's in one of those books. He knew he was not allowed to bring any text with him. So he left his satchel on the bus. And we started wandering around. And as we wandered around, there was a member of the religious community, the Muslim religious community, standing and listening. And at one point during Daron's explanation of where we were, the Muslim religious guide stopped and said, "That's not right." And he began to correct our guide, to change what he was telling us. You could feel the tension. We all looked at one another, and we looked at Daron. Concerned, he handled it adeptly. He went, "Thank you. I appreciate your insights into this. I'm sorry I misunderstood this particular passage. Would you explain it?" And things went on as they should. And then as we were walking about, we also noticed a group of ultra-Orthodox nationalist Jews. Very unusual concept, and we don't have time to go into. Also came up on the Temple Mount the same time we did, surrounded by Israeli security. Because they are a group of Jews who believe that every portion of Israel should be under Jewish control. And they go there in part to create tension. We felt it. We experienced it. It was real. Now, I raise this not just to talk to you about some of the interesting aspects of what life is like in Israel today. I raise it because the Temple Mount was raised in a conversation that I was having with 4 other rabbis. In order to excite the Jewish community about this big mission that we were having to Israel, 508 Cincinnatians went to Israel this summer. It's extraordinary. We had a panel discussion. A group of rabbis, 4 of us, 5 of us, got together. We were sitting at the stage of the Jewish Community Center in Cincinnati, Ohio, talking about what Zionism means to us. And in the course of the conversation, an Orthodox rabbi, who was leading a congregational trip, as was I, as was the other 3 rabbis, said that he hoped that the third temple would be rebuilt. Remember I said there were 2 temples that were destroyed, that were controlled by the priestly class, not by rabbis, but the Kohanim and the Levites? He said, I want that temple rebuilt. He said, I can imagine that. And he said, and I went back and listened to the tape. He said, I know this sounds crazy to some in the room. He used the word crazy. That was his word, not mine. He understood that rebuilding the temple had lots of implication. He recognized the political issues, right? Right now there's a sacred site to 2 Muslim shrines. He recognized the political issues. He also recognized, I think, behind that, the religious issues. But he said something. He says, I imagine the third temple could be built without destroying any of the Muslim sites. So there on the Temple Mount would be the Dome of the Rock, the Al-Aqsa Mosque, and the temple, the third temple. Now, lest you think this is one rabbi in Cincinnati, the chief Ashkenazi rabbi of Israel said exactly the same thing. That he believes it is possible to rebuild the third temple without destroying it. So, sitting on the stage, I was a little taken aback, and he mentioned that he was going to take his congregation to the Temple Institute. I didn't know what the Temple Institute was. I've been to Israel many times. I sort of looked at him with a little question. I had a sense of what it was, but I wanted him to explain it, and he did. And I went to their website. The Temple Institute is dedicated to every aspect of the Holy Temple of Jerusalem, and its central role it fulfilled, and will once again fulfill in the spiritual well-being of both Israel and all the nations of the world. The Temple Institute's ultimate goal is to see Israel rebuild the Holy Temple on Mount Moriah, the Holy Mount, in Jerusalem, in accordance with biblical commandments. If you go to their website, you will see them training priests to reinstitute the temple, which includes sacrifice. To be clear, it's not just a building, it is a form of Judaism. If you think our Rosh Hashanah services are interesting or challenging, guess what it's going to be like when they're streaming from the Holy Temple? Animal sacrifices once again. Now, the Temple Institute was not on Beth Adam's itinerary. We don't have time. But some of you may remember, we did walk by it. And there was this giant, solid gold menorah. I was told it was worth about $4 million. It's not a replica. That's not the right word. They're not building replicas. They are rebuilding all the holy vessels and holy instruments that are going to be used in the temple once again. So people are giving money. And in fact, I came across an article in 2013 in the Jerusalem Post that said that the Israeli government, specifically the Education Ministry and the Cultural and Sports Ministry, which I don't quite understand, has given $300,000 to $700,000 to the Temple Institute. And they gave them another $130,000 of shekels as well. So the Israeli government has given this institute, who's dedicated to rebuilding temple, money. So without getting into the politics, let's not even begin to talk about what would happen if the mosques were destroyed. Just pretend for a minute it was conceivable. It is conceivable somehow that they could squeeze it in, sort of like when we built the stadium in Cincinnati, they're trying to squeeze it in between two other buildings. Imagine that they could squeeze the temple, the Holy Temple, in between the El Oscar Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. Would that be a good idea? To reinstitute sacrifice in Judaism? The answer is obviously no. Anyone want to debate that for a second? It's not a good idea. Think of rebuilding the temple is literally turning back the clock of Judaism more than 2,000 years. They want to turn it back. They are practicing. Watch what they're doing. It is beyond extreme. It speaks to a Judaism that I no longer can fathom. It is a physical act that claims that the future of Judaism can be found 2,000 years ago. And while most Jews aren't yet talking about rebuilding the temple, thankfully, I'm concerned that the state of Israel, the government, has given it money. That is a concern, that they're willing to endorse this as an authentic expression of Jewish identity. Clearly, there are people giving money. There's a $4 million gold menorah sitting outside. We don't have one outside. If we did, we'd be, well, that's another conversation. Okay, the finance committee would deal with a $4 million loan. That's not my problem, okay. But what's concerning to me is that this seems to reflect a pattern within Judaism across many denominations, an infatuation with the past, a belief that if Jews and Judaism are willing to embrace things that used to be, Judaism will survive. With the shrinking number of Jews, and people are gnashing teeth. They're going, will there be Jews tomorrow? And there are many people who are now saying that the future of the Jewish people is in the past. That if we just go back to what it was, we're going to find people once again. Remember, there used to be people at synagogue. So if we pretend like we were in the 50s or the 40s or the 1880s or the 1700s, maybe people will show up again. They're wrong. It's the wrong assumption. When I was a student studying Jewish history, I was taught that it's creativity that allows Judaism to survive. Not replication, recreating something brand new. In fact, the temple was always held up as the perfect example. We don't quite grasp it because we live post-temple. But in the temple period, no one could have believed that Judaism could have existed that didn't involve sacrifice. The temple was destroyed, and the rabbis created a wholly new Judaism. Something that didn't yet exist, and something that could never have been imagined before. Creativity is the lifeblood of Judaism. So I find it ironic that people are holding up the Torah as the future, or the temple as the future. The temple should be held up as it's destroyed and we recreated. It is an example of creativity. It's upon this creativity that Beth Adam has stood for the last 36 years. It's about being relevant and meaningful today. There are lots of people writing about turning back the clock. I've been in a lot of articles, and myself and Rami Shapiro, some of you know Rabbi Rami Shapiro is a colleague, a friend, and we wrote an article in response to this turning back the clock, and I want to read just 2 sentences that we wrote. We must reinvent Judaism as a system for making meaning, discovering wisdom, and living lives rooted in justice and compassion for all. We must articulate a Jewish mission grounded in human reason, informed by evidence, and shaped by the realization that our future does not rest on the past, and that no divine hand will rescue us from ourselves. I'm proud that we wrote that, and I'm proud that Congregation Beth Adam, that's what we've done. We have not abdicated our responsibility to the future. We've not sacrificed our ability to think and reason on the altar of ancient texts. And Beth Adam's philosophy isn't simply marketing. A lot of congregations right now are trying to market to people. They're trying to come up with that new program, that new idea. Our goal has never been simply to market sleight of hand changes to get people to come back. Our approach is grounded in what we believe, deeply held beliefs. And even when there were those who rejected us for what we said, we've never faltered. We've always stood proudly for a bold Judaism. We've not changed our words. We've always said what we mean, and we mean what we say. We can be proud they've articulated a strong, clear message. For 36 years, a double high anniversary, 18 and 18, 18 being a big number in Judaism from the word life, we have boldly declared that we must be more concerned about our descendants than we are about our ancestors. We've grappled with the changes that have been taking place, and we haven't feared to do that. Beth Adam hasn't been about going backwards, it's about going forward. For the human endeavor is about growth. It's about learning, discovering. It's about pushing back the darkness. It's about pushing away the superstitions of the past, embracing tested information. It's about shaking off the shackles that hold us firm and giving us room to grow and expand. This is what Judaism needs. For 36 years, that's what we have done. But as I stand here tonight, I must say that while I'm proud of what we've done, our job isn't over. We can be proud of our past. We should be proud of our past. We have done a lot. We have challenged. But we can't become like the people who see the future in the rearview mirror of history. We keep needing to push forward, to keep on facing the changes that look ahead. We can't say that we've done it all, for if we do, we become like those who are stuck. We must be willing to continue to grow. I can't foresee all the future. But the Jewish world and the world we live in is undergoing change right now. And we need to grapple with some, if not all of them, as they become apparent. Let me just give you a few that I've been thinking about. The nature of personal religious identity is undergoing a change. No longer will people see themselves strictly as one religion or culture or another. We're having blended identities. I see that as I'm teaching in our religious school on a regular basis. Kids see a fuller and more complex identity, and it frightens the Jewish community. We would like everything to be binary, X or not X. Identity is more complex than that. We need to address that. We need to celebrate that. We can't fear it. We need to see it as a way to strengthen our community, not to push more people out. The concept of membership is totally changing. Not just here, but across every institution where membership has ever existed. Everyone is grappling with a new way to relate to institutions. How they get supported, how they maintain themselves, how they structure themselves. Synagogues that look like they do today in 36 years aren't going to survive. No institution that uses that same model, and we're grappling with it, and I'm proud that our board is doing that and talking about this. Demographics and congregational shifts are being felt, and they're beginning to shake more and more in millennials, right? Everyone's going, oh, we want them to be like us. No, she said no. So wait a second. I'm a boomer. I still remember arguing with my father about my hair. This is when I had hair. One of my brothers is probably writing me already. Yes, I used to have hair, and it used to be quite long. And this was a sign. My father was of the greatest generation, fought in World War II, and there was a cultural divide then. We didn't become like they were. We got to be who we were as a new generation. We have to embrace that as well. We cannot ask new generations to become like we. We have to allow them to grow, to find their place, to find their voice, and to fuse the institutions that they love and care about with their insights. That is how progress is made. Science is pushing back the darkness. It is bringing us to places our ancestors never could have conceived of. We're going to be talking about the creation stories, right? Adam and Eve and all that. Do you know this past week, the first child born with 3 genetic parents was born? 3 genetic parents. The people of the Bible couldn't conceive of that. They don't have insight into the world we live in. We have to grapple with that as a community to create responsible, informed, compassionate, meaningful results. And perhaps most importantly, the Judaism of tomorrow cannot be self-absorbed. We cannot be more focused on our own survival and not the concern about the survival of the world and other people we share this planet with. We have to move beyond our own parochial needs and recognize that a strong Judaism is a Judaism that is embracive and welcoming and open. Yes, we have to make sure we have communities, but our responsibility is to the wider community and to the world. Our values and our ideals must have resonance beyond ourselves. We must give voice to a religious philosophical framework that is grounded in reason, evidence, compassion, and the understanding that no divine hand will rescue us from ourselves. This framework can serve the Jewish community, strengthen the Jewish community, and it will move beyond the Jewish community. We have a responsibility to make the world better. And building an intellectual framework will help to do this for ourselves and those outside of this community. The Jewish community cannot look the same in 36 years as it did 36 years ago. If it did, we have failed. We've cheated the future. We've robbed our descendants of their inheritance. Rebuilding the temple speaks to a lack of vision, but more, it speaks to a lack of confidence in ourselves and those who will follow us. Just as we cannot relive the year that is ending, so too, we cannot relive a Judaism from another age. The future beckons. It rests upon us to embrace it with creativity and with courage. This is the call of the new year.